Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Unity Zoom here as we are getting ready to begin, as tonight is the night before Tisha B'Av. We're in the 9 days. As the Rebbe would always talk about bringing unity, Avas Yisrael, Achdus Yisrael, Jewish unity, in order to bring about the Messianic era, the Mashiach, which is through Avas Chinam, and there's no greater way than bringing together all these beautiful Jewish communities out here in California and connecting all the way across the ocean to London, England. And I'd like to begin by wishing everyone good evening, except for Rabbi Sudak, who will wish good morning. We'll be saying Shema Yisrael soon, and he just said Moda'ani. It's 3:30 in the morning in London, so wipe your eyes. And as he's waking up, I'd like to ask for the rabbis, the co-hosts of our Zoom tonight, to introduce yourselves and your communities. And just to note that at the end of this lecture tonight, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. If you go to the chat box, the questions can only be asked to the host or co-hosts. So you can ask your specific rabbi, your particular rabbis, a question. At the end, the rabbis will ask Rabbi Sudak the questions. We have a fascinating evening ahead of us. I'd like to ask Rabbi Shmuley, Rabbi Fuss, introduce yourself.
Hello there, good evening. Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Riversidians, say hello, raise your hand. Great to be on. And hello there, Deborah. I see Joe Myers, great to see you. Henry, welcome. Great to be together from all over California. Rabbi Sudak, hello there. It's been a little while. Great to see you. Thanks for coming on at this time, especially.
Rabbi Ruddle from Chabad of Mount Olympus here in the Hollywood Hills. Raise your hand if you're with our community. And Rabbi Sudak, looking eagerly forward to hearing the amazing history of British Jewry. And thank you all for our community members that came on. And thank you for the unity opportunity for all of our SoCal fellow Jewish communities and Chabads.
Well, out here in Beverly Hills, Rabbi Sudak, you're quite a sensation. We do get a lot of guests coming through from England, and they all mention your name. And I know your family is quite a family out in England for many, many years running the Chabad out there. So to have you on Zoom here in California is a delight.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Avi Rabin from Chabad of West Hills. I'd like to welcome everybody from West Hills to this beautiful Unity Zoom. I'd like to thank Rabbi Morozov and Rabbi Schlanger for putting this together. I'd like to thank Rabbi Sudak for waking up so early and for being there for our communities. I was in yeshiva with Rabbi Sudak, so it's good to see you here tonight. And would like to pray for peace and safety for the Jews all over the world in Great Britain and Israel. And may we only get together for good things. Amen. Thank you. Thank you for hosting this beautiful evening.
Okay, welcome everyone. We're right here in Bakersfield in the center of California. So we'll just embrace everyone with one big hug. We may not be Los Angeles or San Francisco, Beverly Hills, but we have a Harrods mug right here. Anyone that knows a little bit of London. So I would like to take the opportunity to welcome everyone, give a thumbs up if you're here from Bakersfield. We are going to hear from my classmate, close friend, Rabbi Bentzi Sudak in just a few moments. We're here. I'd like to tell you a little bit of an inspirational short story before I introduce Reb Bentzi. Every single day in my room here, I'm reminded of Reb Bentzi because when I was 13 years old, I went to New York with my class. We flew, I'll never forget that flight. We were in the smoking section of Air India, together with the delicious recipes that were coming from Bombay. It was just fantastic flight. And we came to the Rebbe. And I think Bentzi was a little bit younger, was going to go later in the year, his bar mitzvah. But Rabbi Safran, of blessed memory, our teacher, our beloved teacher in the middle, had me practice the words in Yiddish. If I was volunteered in the class to ask the Rebbe for an additional $1 for my good friend Bentzi. So I said to the Rebbe, these words. I'll say it with the little British accent. Rebbe, bitte kann ich haben noch $1 von mein Freund Bentzi Sudak, weil nicht gekannt kommen. And the Rebbe gave me a big smile. The Rebbe stared. I think he liked the Yiddish that I practiced a lot as well. And the Rebbe gave me another $1, which I gave over to Bentzi when I got back to England. Without any further introduction, ladies and gentlemen, from London, England, 3:30 in the morning, what a mensch, Rabbi Bentzi Sudak.
Shmuley, thank you very much. And it was really good to see all of those old friends, some of whom I haven't seen in a while. Actually, we in London also had a joint event earlier this evening with California. We had Dina Horowitz.
Oh, wonderful.
And we had 400 people from around the UK come on to a Zoom lecture, and it was incredibly inspiring. Dina Horowitz from Temecula, Rabbi Yitzi's wife, and Rabbi Yitzi was on as well. We got to see him. It was a really beautiful, very inspiring evening. And that moment you saw in that picture is very special. My kids know about that moment. They've seen that picture. We have the dollar, and it's very much cherished. So I grew up, like Shmuley, in London, and I lived in America, and I'm back in London now. I moved back here 10 years ago. But for about 13, 14 years of my life, I was living in the States, during which I became an American citizen. And for those of you who were born in America, I'm sure you know American history, but if you go through the process of becoming an American citizen, it's something that is very, very special. You learn about the history, and you learn about a vision and a dream, what America stands for. It's not looking back, it's looking forward. And it's impossible to be in the room with people from all over the world who have all gone through this process and this months of learning, and you're buying into this vision of the American dream. When I say American dream, I don't mean owning a house. I mean the dream that the founding fathers of America had, and not to have tears in your eyes. And the reason why I say this is because now my children growing up in England are in school, they also learn history. And for the past God knows how many years, I've been hearing the same thing about the Tudors. The Tudors lived a few centuries ago in England, and they repeat this history about the Tudors. And what do we know about the Tudors? They had bad food, they stank, they beat each other up, and they had bad manners and no sanitary options, and the place was disgusting. It was a bunch of savages who ate bad food and killed each other. And you have to hear this again and again. And it gets a little bit boring. So the opposite is the American idea, is where it's going forward. There's a dream, there's something you're living for. And I don't think necessarily you realize it when you grow up and are a born citizen, but when you become a citizen, you have to study it, and you're a little bit more mature, it has a strong resonance with you. The reason why I'm saying this is because a lot of times we're talking about history, and we're talking about British history. So you might start thinking, brains go, oh, Tudors, I'm not interested, it's boring. But the truth is, tonight is not about history. Because I don't know if anybody knows, what's the Hebrew word for history? There is no Hebrew word for history. They use the word historia. Historia is just history with an A at the end. There is no word for history in Hebrew. Classic Hebrew, the word is zachor, which means to remember. There's a very big difference between remembering and history. They're almost the opposite. History means his story, not mine. It's something that happened, and you have to know it because you have to know history. But in Judaism, we don't have history. We have a tradition, we have a heritage that we are plugging into. Like when you plug an appliance into a wall and to turn it on, it draws all its energy from there. When we are going through what we're going to see through tonight, we are tapping in to an energy that kept Jews going for a millennium in England, with a break in the middle, and millennia around the world. It's who we are. We're not studying history about something from before. We are like an appliance plugging into the generator and seeing who we are. So with that introduction, I'm going to go back a little bit, and we hopefully will see from here how we can. Jews always bounce back. We always showed resilience, and now is a time when every one of us are being thrown into a different kind of place that we've never been before. We're not used to it. With COVID, with lockdown, businesses changing, and we need that resilience. We need that goal. We need that focus. So hopefully through this journey of the Jewish experience in England over the past 1,000 years, we'll be able to leave tonight with something to draw that we could take forward, something, a little bit more insight of the treasure that each one of us has as a Jew. So I'm going to be sharing my screen right now, and I'll show you a few things from the beginning of Jewish history in England. So what happened was, in 1066, William the Conqueror was Norman conquest. You may have heard of the word Normandy. Normandy is in France and named after Norman. William was part of the Norman conquest. His father was Norman, and he conquered England. And he, and he invites a group of Jews from Rouen and France to settle in England. Now, the main reason why he did that was because Jews had connections in various countries around the world. Jews were allowed, Christians were not allowed to lend money on interest when Jews were. And therefore, he invited the Jews to come over because of their financial connections, but they were not allowed to own land. They were not allowed to participate in any other trade other than being a doctor or lending money. Now, what happens is you lend money on interest, and the king owns the Jews. Basically, there was a class system, and the Jews were a part of the lower class system, but the king was at the top, and normally there's a chain of command. The Jews were directly under the king, not higher up in the chain, almost the same as the peasant level, but skipping all the layers. And this enabled the king to charge the Jews interest, and the Jews would lend the money to the people. And it was basically usury by proxy, which meant that the Jews are the ones charging the interest, and the king taxes the Jews, and that's how he gets the money. And they had a special exchequer of the Jews. So there was a special division in the Bank of England just so they should have just to manage the Jews' wealth. And by 1168, within 100 years, the Jews were the wealthiest people in England. Aaron of Lincoln was richer than the king, and 25% of British wealth was owned by Jews. Now on the side here, you'll see some pictures. These are all recent pictures. And you'll see there's what's incredibly unique about this class today is that you're going to see things that are still going on, that still exist from 1,000 years ago. You'll see homes from Jews from 1,000 years ago, and we'll see and hear things how they sounded 300 years ago, which is incredible. I don't know how many other places in England. So on the top here, we have a street sign in the city of London. The city is, for those of you who are not familiar with London, the city is the square mile that was originally the city of London, and today it's the financial district of London. So in the city, there is a street called Old Jewry, which is where the Jews lived 1,000 years ago in the first settlement when they came in 1066. On the end of that street, next to number 10, there's a sign, which is the next sign, that says, "The Great Synagogue stood near this site until 1272. So this is where the big synagogue that the Jews had in London stood. And below that is a picture from 2001. In 2001, they were rebuilding the Bank of India. Maybe Shmuley, they found your leftover lunch from your Air India flight back there in the ground. But they found a mikveh from the 1200s around the corner from there. Now think about that for a minute. There's a mikveh there, and there's another mikveh in Bristol, which it's called, you can't really tell today it's a mikveh, but the building is called Jacob's Well, and there's even a sign, also not legible, but it said Mayim Zochalim, which means running waters. And they built this mikveh here. Now think about this. This is a long time ago. It's 1,000 years ago, right? Tomorrow night, English, your time, tonight, my time, begins Tisha B'Av. It's the destruction of the temple, and maybe later we'll get to show some pictures of that. There's a beautiful 3D movie that came out recently of how incredibly beautiful that was. What an experience. And Jewish people were in the temple. It was magnificently huge. Even by today's standard, a building like that would be world famous. There really isn't anything, even today, of such magnificence. And think about for a second what Passover was like. Passover, you'd go there from all over the world. People would come. They would have this gathering with their family and their friends, and they would eat this lamb, and it was full of celebrations, etc. And then it's gone. And the next Passover comes, and for the first time in history, you're sitting at home away from Jerusalem on your own with your family, with a few thin matzah crackers and some bitter herbs. And how terrible must that have been compared to the way it was before? Any other society, any other culture that goes through that would lose everything. And yet, here you have Jews, 1,200 years later, moving to this brand new country, invited by the king, bounced from slavery, Rome, Italy, around Europe, rebuilding themselves, still remembering who they are, and coming to London, and they build this mikveh. Now think about that. This is a long time ago, almost 1,000 years, 900 years. This is, this mikveh is closer to our time in history than the temple was for them. Think about that. So more time had passed from the time of the temple till they moved, till they opened this mikveh in the 1200s, than what's happened to us. They're still doing it, and it's still happening now. There's mikvahs in California. There's new mikvahs being built in London, in England, London, popping up all over the world. Just that kind of thing, I think, is extremely unique about us, and it's what kept us going. And here you have it right in front of your eyes. And sometimes, every so often, we get regards, like this mikveh that was only found in 2001. Regards reminding us who we are and what we're about. Again, this is not about history. This is about remembering. This is about us tapping in to that generator of those things. So that's where we have it right there. They were tapping in, building that mikveh. They weren't building a historical relic of what they had 1,200 years earlier in the temple, or 1,000 years earlier. They were plugging in to their remembrance. They were remembering. It wasn't history. It was about remembering. Zachor, to remember. So now here we have Aaron of Lincoln. I mentioned before, he was one of the wealthiest people in the country. And him and other Jews, they built big monuments like the one on the top right. That was something that Aaron of Lincoln built. They were abbeys, cathedrals, sometimes used as churches, but they were also used as defenses, forts for the Jews to run in and hide when the anti-Semitism got too high. On the left, we see Aaron of Lincoln's house. Then that's today. The next one is Jornet's house in Norwich. This is again standing. This is from 1170. This house belonged to a guy called Isaac Jornet. The picture I took from Google Street View, actually. It's a recent picture. And you'll notice that the front door is a tiny door there. Today is it's a artificial door that was added later, but there was no door to the street. The entrance to the house, you had to go through a gate and round the back. On the right, we have the ground floor of the house, which is vaulted. And the reason is because when there were attacks, most of the Jews would end up going to one of these big palaces or abbeys, and the Drunettes, who were the richest people, they were able to stay home because people couldn't get into their house because there was no door from the front street. The gate around the alley was locked, and even if they would break in from the street, they would barely be able to get in because the ground floor was just solid brick, vaulted bricks, and that's how it was built for that kind of security. This is that mikveh that I showed you before. This is how it was discovered. This is a picture of the builder discovering it. In the middle, you see how they, after they rebuilt the building over the Bank of India, they managed to transport the mikveh, and right now it's on display at the Jewish Museum in London. But things didn't go so well. And especially then, there was a lot of persecution. And a lot of things were exported from England. The first blood libel was in England. The first Jewish badge was from England. In 1190, Richard the Lionheart starts the Third Crusade, goes to Israel, to take Israel or Palestine back from Saladin. And instigated by people who owed money to the Jewish people, to certain Jews, they instigated riots in York. And at the top, there is Clifford's Castle in York. The rabbi at the time, Yontef Meyoni, who is one of the Baalei Tosafot, if you learn Talmud, there's the Tosafot on the side of the page, that was composed by the generations following Rashi. One of them was this Rabbi Yontef Meyoni, who was a student of Rabbeinu Tam. He was the rabbi of York in England at the time. And like I said before, when the Jews ran to these castles for protection, they went to Clifford's Tower in York for protection against the mob. But the mob still gathered around, and they were about to break into the castle. And they gave the Jews a choice to convert or die. None of them chose to convert. They all chose to give up their lives. And Rabbi Yontef of Yoni said that it would be better for communal suicide rather than to be forced or mutilated by the mob. And the building was set fire by the Jews inside, and the mob were not able to get to them. There were a few Jews who did manage to escape, and they tried to convert, and they were killed anyway. And this today, you can go to Clifford's Tower in New York and see the monument to the Jews who lived there then. And until a few decades ago, there was actually a cherem, a ban on Jews spending a night or living in York. The first blood libel I mentioned happened in William of Norwich, where I said, where Isaac Drunet's house was. They actually tried to make this William, who was killed. They tried to blame it on the Jews. It was never proven. They never found when they found the body, they didn't find any wounds that could corroborate it. But he became a saint, and this is where the idea of the blood libel started. The idea of a Jewish badge we see underneath. That is a picture from the 13th century, 1218. They passed this law that Jews had to wear this badge. It was basically two yellow strips that represented the luchot, the tablets of the law. And this is a depiction of some Jews getting punished for whatever it may be. And finally, in 1253, they start enacting laws. There's a statute of Jewry, which was no new synagogues. When you're in synagogue, you have to lower your voices so people shouldn't hear, and the Jews are not allowed to interrupt other people when they're in conversation, etc., etc. By 1275, a new law was passed by Parliament that banned usury, banned any lending money with interest, which now the king no longer needs the Jews, because if no one's going to borrow money from the Jews and pay interest, and he won't be able to tax them, they're no longer a source of income. So by 1290, they kicked the Jews out. Also in 1275, a Jew was not allowed to buy land other than for a maximum of a 15-year period, which was already preparing the ground for the expulsion at 1290. So 1290 comes, and King Edward no longer needs the Jews. And there's another source, these Italian merchants who come. They're allowed by the Pope to charge interest, and they replace the Jews as the income. So Jews now are expelled from England for 300 years. But during that time, there were a few exceptions. There was something called a domus conversum, which was a house for the Jews who decided to convert and either live like Marranos or they gave in. And out of, I think, 20,000 Jews, or 25,000, only 80 decide that they're going to convert and stay, and they have to move into this place called Domus Conversum, which is a new street in London. I started doing some research, and guess what I found? You'll see that picture at the top. There's a beautiful sukkah. It's a sukkah that we put up every year in the city of London, together with all the major firms, all the big banks, the law firms, and Deloitte, Goldman Sachs, a number of larger law firms, all partner together with Chabad, and we put up the sukkah that you see there, and about 1,000 people come over Sukkot in for lunches, for events, etc. And that's in a place called New Street Square. After looking into it, I see that New Street changed to Chancery Lane, which is around the corner from there. And basically, on the spot where 700 years ago we had Jews being forced to go and convert, this is where Jewish people today proudly, in the middle of the street, have this absolutely magnificent structure showing the infinite life, almost the unbreakable bond of Jews with their Yiddishkeit, with their tradition, with who we are, with our source of life. Now, in the 1500s, after the expulsion from Spain, there start to become some secret Jews start living in England. One of them was a guy called Rodrigo Lopez, who was the doctor of Queen Elizabeth I. There was also other things you can look up, a Jewish goldsmith, a chemist, another doctor. And towards the end of the 1500s, there is a secret Jewish community already thriving in England, but they're not legal here. So they start to develop this, and then this leads to the resettlement of the Jews. So there was a rabbi in Holland called Menashe ben Israel, who also invented the first Jewish printing press. He was from a family of Marranos, and he started to be able to, in Holland, openly live as Jews. So in 1492, the Jews were expelled from Spain. Holland was still under Spanish rule, but they were a little bit more lenient there. So Jews who lived secretly as Jews moved there from Spain and Portugal, and it became known as the Spanish and Portuguese Jews, or the original Sephardim. Sephard is Hebrew for Spain, and these Jewish people from Holland start working in England. At the time, Oliver Cromwell, who has led a revolution in England, and now has the title, is pretty much in charge of the country, and he has the title Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England. So Oliver Cromwell is petitioned by Menashe ben Israel, and this is what we see on the top right here, Menashe ben Israel going to Oliver Cromwell to ask that the Jews be allowed to remain. And this document that I have in the center is the letter from Menashe ben Israel to Oliver Cromwell. And he says, in acknowledging the manifold favors and protection of the high of His Highness, we ask him to grant security and permission for the Jews residing in the city of London, and whose names are underwritten. And you'll see at the bottom, you see Menashe ben Israel's signature. Now this document is hanging in the synagogue of the Spanish and Portuguese, and that is still today. They build shul in the city of London on a street called Bevis Marks. The shul was opened in 1701, and you could see a picture of it, how it looks today at the top, and it's still candle lit. It's still lit by candlelight. They have electric lights during regular day, and they haven't had but on a Yom Kippur, on a special occasion, they use the original chandeliers, which are still candle lit. So it actually, what you see, that beautiful color photo is from today. It's exactly what it looked like in 1701. Interestingly, around the corner from my house, about 10-minute walk from here, there is another building called Cromwell House, which is where Jews had like a summer house, and there's a mikveh in there as well that was built. Now, here where it becomes very fascinating, because look, this building at the bottom here, which is Bevis Marks Shul. Bevis Marks is the name of the street. If you'll go there, you won't see anything. This here is Google Earth view. So it's a street right in the middle of London. It's actually, I don't know if anyone knows the Gherkin, which is the big building that looks like a gherkin in the middle of London. It's a famous landmark. It's right next door. But if you go down the street, you won't see it, because the Jews were not allowed to build on the street. So you can see the Bevis Marks Synagogue is circled in red inside, surrounded by another building, and you can only go through it, access it through an arch. At the top of the arch, there's a sign. And so it's accessible through an arch from the main street, but you can't see it from the main street. And that's what they allowed the Jews then to do. Don't get yourself right up front. Keep yourselves in the corner. It looks from above. You can see that the shul is like hidden almost. Now, what's fascinating here is it looks the same as it did 300 years ago. Look on the left. That's a painting from the 1700s. Look on the right is a picture from today. And I'll even give you another treat, that in the next slide, you can actually hear what the sounds were like. I have a friend whose family have been members of this choir for 10 generations. And they have tunes that they brought from Spain with them as well. Now, if you look on the left, this is a drawing from the 1800s. We'll get to talk about him in a minute, but Moses Montefiore, for his 100th birthday, in that shul, they made a celebration. And this is a newspaper clipping from his birthday party. And we're going to just play now, and that was then. Look how they're dressed with those colors. And I'm going to flip over to the video where we can, in 2014, where they installed Rabbi Dweck, the new chief rabbi of the Sephardim. Let's have a listen. That's Rabbi Dweck. He's wearing the same clothes that they wore then 300 years ago. You can see the candlelit chandeliers in the middle. You'll be able to see me there as the camera is right in front of me. But this is a shul. these are tombs from hundreds of years ago. You can see the inside of the ark, the same wallpaper as then. Okay, now another person who lived in England is this person here, and I'm not sure if anyone knows who this is. This mistakenly many times is used as a picture for the Baal Shem Tov, but it wasn't. It's not the Baal Shem Tov. In fact, on the left, the picture on the left even says this is a painting of the Baal Shem Tov, and they actually have the signature of the Baal Shem Tov there. This wasn't the Baal Shem Tov. This is someone called Rabbi Dr. Shmuel Chaim Falk, who was the Baal Shem of London, not the Baal Shem Tov. A Baal Shem meant somebody who meant a master of a name, which meant they were able to use amulets and practical Kabbalah and using names, master of a name, meaning using the names of God to do certain, sometimes magic or healing people, etc. He was born in Germany and he came over to England because of certain persecution that he had. And he had his own shul here. And there is correspondence with the rabbis of the time, Yaakov Emden and others, wondering whether he is legitimate or not. Interestingly, the word Baal Shem, used for someone who was a practical Kabbalist, meaning they were able to use Kabbalah for practical, making practical medicines or things like that. There were a lot of charlatans in those days. And many people say that the Baal Shem Tov was called the Baal Shem Tov because he was a good Baal Shem. Not all of them were actually such holy people. They were like alchemists, some of them. But then there were real ones. Now, there is nothing to say that the Baal Shem of London was anything sinister, God forbid. And they even have his diary in the London Beth Din, in the United Synagogue. They have a copy of his diary. The reason how this became mistaken for the Baal Shem Tov was because in 1908, there was an article about the Baal Shem of London, Dr. Falk, which was published. And on page 2, they had a picture of him and it says Baal Shem of London. And somehow this picture got misused or misappropriated to be the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. But it's not somebody with that compass. It's definitely not the way he would dress. The Baal Shem Tov didn't wear a beret. But there's an interesting piece of trivia that some people may not know about. Here is something which I wasn't sure as an American citizen if I should share, but I'm dual citizen and I was thinking, okay, maybe, and also give you an insight to what happened and how old this community is. This here, if you can see in the magnified part, you'll make out the words America there. And this was during the American War of Independence. The Jews here, we pray for the king on Shabbat. And this was a special prayer that was added that England should succeed in its war in America, which thank God, always Hashem says yes. And thank God that was one of the times. As an American citizen myself, and even if I wasn't an American citizen, I think England has benefited greatly. I don't think anyone here in this country will argue with the fact that American independence has given England a tremendous amount. I'm not going to get into that, but you wouldn't even want to imagine what the world would be like without America today. But this is a page from a siddur just from back then, just to give you a context of the history. Now, the 1800s things start becoming a lot better for the Jews here. The first Jewish knight, Moshe Chaim Montefiore, and there was that very corny joke about how he comes to Queen Victoria and he forgets his lines, and he says in Latin, and all he says is "Manish Tana Laila Zemi Kola Leilot," because that was the first line on his mind. And Queen Victoria says, "Why is this night different than all other nights?" Now that's a very corny joke, but the first Jewish knight was Moses Montefiore. Moses Montefiore was a businessman. He was a soldier as well. And he spent a lot of time traveling to different parts of the world, advocating for the Jews of Russia, advocating for the Jews in Israel. He met various leaders and kings and really worked very hard for the plights of Jews to avert certain decrees, whether it was the Tsar in Russia, the Sultan in Egypt, whoever it was, he was always, and there are pictures that I wasn't able to completely scan, but just up on my shelf here I have. I might be able to show you. I'll stop sharing for a second, but when I bring it up, but there's of travels that he went around the world doing. So let me stop sharing for 1 second. And this is the this here is going backwards. So this here is a depiction of it's getting a bit confusing of him on his travels through the desert. That's him meeting the Sultan, the Tsar, and traveling around. These are newspaper drawings from his time, traveling around the world. This is his home in Ramsgate in England, which later became actually a Chabad retreat in the 1960s. And there he is. He was knighted by the Queen, but he did a tremendous amount for Jews around the world. There's a lot of things called the Montefiore Endowment that still goes on. The cemetery where the Rebbe has the Ohel is, the Rebbe's resting place, is in the Montefiore Cemetery. He built the Montefiore windmill in Jerusalem. Now, he was extremely wealthy, and Queen Victoria once asked him how much he is worth. And he gave a certain figure, and she said, "I know you're worth a lot more than that." He says, "You didn't ask me how much I have. You asked me how much I am worth." What a person is worth is not what they've taken from society and kept for themselves. What a person is worth, their value, is what they've given. So I told you my value of what I've given to charity this year. You didn't ask me how much I had. You asked me how much I am worth. And I am worth what I have given. I'm not worth what I have kept. And just to prove that, today in England, we have the Montefiore Endowment, which still gives, it still ordains rabbis, and a lot of Jewish heritage is still continuing till today through his money that he passed away over 100 years ago. And his legacy is still alive. His work is still alive through the charity that he's given. In 1841, the first mayor, Isaac Leon Goldsmith, and then it was the peer, which means a lord, then the first mayor of London. In 1874 was the first Israeli prime minister, Jewish prime minister. But he was baptized, so he was. Actually, he told Queen Victoria that he's like the page between the Old and the New Testament. He didn't find himself actually belonging anywhere. Either way, becomes prime minister. And once being insulted in Parliament, he says, "When the ancestors of the right honorable gentleman were brutal savages in an unknown island, mine were priests in the temple of Solomon." So here you have a Jew who was given this, anti-Semitism, you're an outsider. But what did he do? He plugged back in, not to his history, but he remembered, even a Jew who baptized. But he remembered who he is. And he wasn't just going back on history. Oh, about Solomon. He basically was saying, I am a living, breathing Jew. What are you? You're a living, breathing, brutal savage in an unknown island. You even baptized me, but I'm still a descendant of Kohanim, of priests in Solomon's temple. Also, actually, in all in 1890, restrictions are removed in England, and also at first Jews weren't even allowed to be citizens. By 1890, Jews are allowed to do everything. And there were at this time, just before then, there were about 50,000 Jews in the country. But then through the pogroms and the persecution around Europe, England opens its doors. And by 1920, there are 120,000 or more. The 120,000 Jews in London. There are about 200,000 Jews in England. The Ashkenazim now, and up until this point, these are Spanish and Portuguese or Sephardic Jews. Now the Ashkenazim came. By 1919, 250,000 Jews now live in England. And then there is the war, Second World War. Second World War brings in another 80,000 Jews and the Kindertransport, which is children who are allowed to be brought into England without their parents from Europe. On the right, we see the monument at Liverpool Street Station for the Kindertransport, the kids coming off the boats in England, in London, off the trains in London, and that's where they arrived first. And this is a group of children fresh off the boat. From behind, one of the boy on the right, you can actually see he's wearing a nice yarmulke. The boy on the left has a cap, but this if you ever see the monument, they're dressed like Jewish kids, and they're just coming off the boat. It's about 10,000 Jewish kids there. After the war is when Chabad settles in England, and that is those who ran away from the war, who escaped Russia and Europe. They finally made their way through Europe. Some went to America, some went to England. Now on the right, the bottom, you see. Just one second, I'm going to bring that picture up a little bit to the front. On the right, on the bottom, you see the first Chabad Hebrew school. This is my grandfather, Rabbi Bentzi Sudak, and this is a group of children in 1948, 1949, who in his backyard, this was the sum total of Chabad in England at the time. My grandfather, Bentzi Sudak, was who I'm named after. He was born in Russia in 1917 when communism broke out. The sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe called 9 students in a room. And he said, Jewish life in Russia is under mortal threat. We need to make a covenant that we're going to do whatever it takes to keep Jewish life alive in Russia. And in a letter, the sixth Rebbe writes that Bentzi Sudak was a single student then, he wasn't married, and he was the first to say Amen. And he ended up having about 1,500 students in his underground Jewish schools in Russia, setting up mikvahs, setting up factories that were closed on Shabbat that enabled Jews to earn a living. And in the end, he was arrested. He was arrested right before Pesach, and he's about to set up all the matzahs and the seders all over the place for the Jewish people who are stuck. And he realizes he won't be able to because he's arrested. And they're torturing him, trying to find information, who's giving him the money, who's helping him, and they can't find a thing. Now, what I'm quoting for you is from the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak at the time. And he says that he found favor in the eyes of the communist KGB. They liked him. And he somehow convinced them that you're not going to get any information by torturing me. Let me out, follow me, And then maybe you'll find out some information that you need. And they buy it. They let him out. This is the KGB. I don't know if you understand what we're talking about. They actually let him out. And he goes, sets up his matzah bakeries, his seders, making sure everyone has the matzah, and they are none the wiser. They've followed him everywhere, but for some reason, they can't find a single name. Finally, they arrest him again, and he's sent to Siberia, but by this time he's engaged. And 4 years later, his bride, his fiancée, my grandmother, follows him to Siberia, where they get married using a wedding ring fashioned from a silver spoon that they managed to get. And then after the war, they come here, and this is the first Chabad institution. They then, in 1959, my father is sent, Rabbi Nachman Sudak, my father is sent here by the Rebbe, and they build this building we see on the right. And this building is very interesting. At the time, the term Chabad house didn't exist. And they asked the Rebbe, what should they call the building? The Rebbe said he should call it Lubavitch House, or for some reason, if that doesn't work, call it Chabad House. And so you see the name Lubavitch House written there. And it was probably the first building I know in England for sure. I don't know any, maybe other places around the world. JCCs happened later, but the first religious Jewish building that didn't have a synagogue in it and didn't have a mikveh. Notice that we built mikvahs, we showed the mikvahs before. Why? But they had a pool and a gym. Instead of a synagogue, there was a gym. Instead of a mikveh, there was a swimming pool. And this was because the Rebbe said to Chabad here that a Jewish child needs a safe place to swim. A Jewish child needs a safe place to be a child, needs a good gym and a good auditorium. These places, the gym you can daven in, and they convert it on Shabbat, and it looks like a synagogue. But you cannot do gym in a synagogue. You can pray in a gym, you can't do gym in a synagogue. You can, and the mikveh, there are other mikvehs around, but a swimming pool, there wasn't for the Jewish kids. So they built this pool. And in those days, this is 1961, 62, such a phenomenon didn't exist. And this just shows you the kind of region. This became a prototype for Chabad houses around the world later as the phenomenon. But at that point, the whole idea didn't exist. Here we have actually a very interesting picture of one of the first Chabad on campus events in England. This is in the early 1960s. On the left in the circle, you have Rabbi Zalman Posner of blessed memory from Tennessee, a Chabad rabbi and speaker, speaking to students. The circled student in the front row on the right is Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, Lord Jonathan Sacks, who today became the chief rabbi of England and now probably the chief rabbi of the world in a way, one of the leading Jewish figures in world Jewry today. And you could see how focused he is already over there on the speech. Now, this is a brief map of Chabad in England today. 60 Chabad houses, 24 in London, 15 on campuses, 129 Shluchim families, etc. And there's the map. I'll also show you, just before we have some pictures, the renaissance of Jewish life in England today. I'll stop sharing, we'll have some questions. It was incredible. Just a few months ago, we had Hanukkah in Trafalgar Square, 5,000 Jews in Trafalgar Square with a concert, 30-foot menorah standing, and Jews really proud. And this was actually right after Jeremy Corbyn lost the election. And what was amazing was we had it every year, but this year it felt like a real celebration. And something that was missing in a way, someone pointed out this, there were far fewer flags. Normally there's loads of Israeli flags, people come, and I asked a few people who I knew, I said, why didn't you bring a flag? He says, I didn't think of it. And he told me, because I don't bring my flag with me when I go to a family simcha. I'm just going to celebrate. He says, until now we felt we had to go in the street and we had to make a statement. He said, I didn't feel I needed to make a statement today. I just felt like I'm in my place. When I was growing up in England, Jewish people in England were much more, in a way, quiet, British, subdued. Even 10 years ago, there was a letter sent to the newspaper, that it's arrogant that Chabad puts these menorahs up all over the place. And today, even this week, if you've been following in England, we have this rapper who did some really absolutely disgusting things said disgusting things on Instagram and on Twitter for 48 hours. And Jewish people came out, Jewish people who work in the media, Jewish people who are regular people. 30, 40 years ago, those people would have really kept their whole identity under the wraps. Today, people are out and proud, and they are standing up. As we saw, when there was a threat, people come out and they are proud to be Jewish. They're digging in this whole history idea that I was saying before. The remembrance, it's really coming to the fore. People are really starting to really come proud about who they are. And the other thing was, during lockdown itself, my family and others, how we were, like everyone else. I've got 6 kids here in a pretty modest house, and how do we manage to cope? What's noticed, obviously, much strongly in Chabad, we did this. We made sure that every 4,000 families had a Seder at home, had the Jewish joys of Pesach, where many people thought they wouldn't be able to do. Because the message that Judaism carries with it, especially the message that Chabad, that the Rebbe brought with, was that you can view the world as a jungle, where it's a bad place, everything comes random, and bad things happen by default. Or you could view the world as a garden where there's a plan. And it's a good place, and sometimes things happen that are not so great. But if it's a garden, which is what Jews believe because God created it and it's planned, then you are part of that garden. And there is something that is demanded of you at any given moment because you were planted at that place. So instead of your focus being as a victim, oh my, look what's happening to me, what do I do? Your question on your mind isn't what will be, which is a victimhood question. Your question is, what do we do? And what is demanded of me now? What is, in this greater plan of things, what is the next thing that is expected of me? And when we shift the question from what's going to be to what is expected of me, we move ourselves from the jungle of victimhood to the garden of leadership, where each one of us is a leader, each one of us takes an action. So I will just finish off with a wish that things should go well for everybody. And we should see clearly how we are a leader, each one of us. And there's something for every single human being that's alive today. There is something that is dependent on us. And there's a difference that we can make. And when we shift our mindset to that, realizing that this world is a garden, not a jungle, and we are part and we play a crucial role in that garden, and we have to, and there's something for us to do right now, it changes the mindset completely, and we see the opportunities that lay before us. Thank you very much, everybody, and if there are any questions, I'll stay on.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Sudak. If any other rabbis have questions that came into them in the chat, they can ask. I'll just start. I have a question here. One second. Does Chabad have a relationship with the royal family? So,
yes, very. Actually, I don't know why that didn't come up. I will show some here. That slide for some reason got lost. Here on the right, you see myself with Prince Charles. On the left is my father with the Queen. There's Rabbi Safran with the Queen. The Jewish people in general have had a very soft spot in the with the royal family. Prince Charles, in his speech on Hanukkah, spoke of how the mutual affection that his family has and the Jewish community have together. When my father was given the award from the Queen, he gave her a mezuzah. Now, in general, a mezuzah is only supposed to be given to Jewish people to hang up on the doors. But a mezuzah as a protection, one can give to a non-Jew. So my father had a special mezuzah crafted like a Megillah in a silver case. Gave it to the Queen. She actually there, she thanked him for it. And I, in off the record meetings afterwards, there were a few times when we've had certain conversations, and also in this picture over here with Prince Charles, it was my birthday that day, and I told him, I was introduced to him, and I was told it's Rabbi Sudak's birthday. The prince was told that was my birthday, so I told him that I want to give you a blessing because it's my birthday. He was like, don't the blessings flow the other way? So I said, no, in Judaism, a birthday is the day that your mazel, your luck, shines. And it's the day that you are chosen to, it's the day that God chose that you should be part of his garden and be part of his enterprise. So it's a day when you are able to bless, and therefore I want to give you a blessing. I did not know that what was about to happen in the family, but I gave a good blessing and I hope they come true. Any other questions? At the bottom, you have Boris Johnson. I'll just go through these pictures here. But the bottom is Boris Johnson visiting the Chabad school. Next to it is him coming to Hanukkah in Trafalgar Square with our mascot Dreidel Man. And to the right is the Scottish leader, Nicola Sturgeon, at Chabad of Edinburgh's Hanukkah festival, holding a picture of the Rebbe. Any other questions?
Any of the rabbis have raised your hand if anybody has a question in their chat?
Yeah, Bentzi.
Rabbi, why am I a United States citizen? I am a United States citizen because I am married to an American I had children in America, and I love America. I mean, I lived there, and why not become a citizen? America is an incredible country, and I want to be, from a practical part, I want to be the same citizens as the rest of my family. But on a deeper level, living in England, we had the Brexit debate last year, and something that struck me was that this country was missing something. This country was missing something, or still is, that America has, and that is a dream and a vision and a goal of what you're going for. And I think as Jews, we also need to remember that Jews and Judaism has a vision and a goal. And that vision and goal is this beautiful world, which is the world known as what we've been praying for 2,000 years, 3 times a day. That Mashiach should come and bring peace to the world as what our whole enterprise of Judaism is going for. So becoming a US citizen really resonated with me because America is a forward-looking country. Its history itself is about looking forward. And the Jewish history itself is about looking forward. So that's why a US citizen.
Bentzi, that's beautiful. You know, I also became an American citizen, and I denounced my British citizenship. So what do you say about that?
Oh.
Doesn't that make me a full-fledged American? You know, I wasn't jumping on both sides of the wedding, Bentzi.
Oh, Well, I'm a shliach in England.
And you're doing good, and you're doing good work. If I understand, your work goes all over England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. Am I right? Seriously, you've got rabbis there that you oversee, and they come together. And
yeah, it was incredible. If you want, we'll show you a little clip that we made afterwards. And if people first the questions, I'd rather not come. A few people are asking me some things. I generally I don't comment on political things. I lived in Washington for a few years, just from people privately out writing to me on the message group.
yeah,
And I don't think anyone knew how I would vote. And I don't think people know how. That's not my. A Chabad shliach is about reaching every Jew, no matter how they vote, and therefore I don't think it's relevant. How did UK Jews, prior to the UN mandate, it was difficult actually for some Jews, because prior to the UN mandate, which means while the British mandate, Phil is asking, how did the UK Jews fare during Israel's insurrection prior to the UN mandate? So what I think you mean is that during the time while Israel was under British mandate, and it was a tough time because Jewish people, because England was not too popular among Jewish people. They weren't allowing Jews to emigrate to Israel. You had the bombing of the King David Hotel, which was a British headquarters, by Jewish people. It was tough, but it wasn't as tough. It wasn't as bad as it was before the war. Before the war, you had Oswald Mosley with the black shirts, who was like Hitler. He was a parliamentarian. He was popular. He spoke well, and he led a demonstration of thousands of people through the East End, which is where Jews lived. And it's called the Battle of Cable Street. I'll actually show you for a second. That was tough, but what happened later wasn't as tough. Here, look at this for a second. This was
put aside the little men of power and delay, on the other side the fellow men and women. Oh, there we go forward to action. Let's go down.
That was Oswald Mosley, and he led this demonstration through Cable Street, the Jewish area, and the police were protecting his right to protest. But thousands and thousands of Jews and others came out to protect the Jewish neighborhood.
Once they started speaking, we used to have to allow them a certain time before the fight.
Those are the crowds there, and the police charging
anybody in the cities who was in between us and the black shirts were their supporters, so we should be clobbering. Of course, we sometimes got in too quick.
The Jewish people of Cable Street won their and the demonstration was left. You could Google it, Battle of Cable Street. So compared to those days, which he had his black shirts, which were like the Nazi youth of the brown shirts in Germany, and were gaining popularity, Jews were feeling quite okay. Any other questions?
Okay.
There's a question about from Oleg about anti-Semitism today in England. Is there a lot? Is it less than it was? Could you talk about that?
It's not as bad as it seems from afar. That's one thing I can tell you. I don't feel threatened anywhere I go. We had the elections before. On Twitter, things seem terrible. It might be so in the States as well. And before the election, Jeremy Corbyn was representing a very hard left element who were quite virulent in their anti-Semitism in a lot of the things that they were saying. And right before the election, it looked very, very close. And he had a resounding defeat. Now, what was amazing was Jews didn't cower. Jews stood up. Jews, even like I said on this weekend with this rapper who attacking Jewish people. Jews came out now. Jews are coming out, and Jews then came out and didn't take it quietly. A friend of mine, worked in a national newspaper and they had and this was very reassuring. He told me this after the election. So this newspaper went and did focus groups in little towns in England where people had never met a Jew. And these are towns that have voted Labour, which is Jeremy Corbyn's party, for years. But now he was a leader, and the local townsmen were telling the reporters that we are not going to vote Labour for the first time in our lives. Some of it was down to Brexit, but a lot of them who'd never met a Jew before said he's an anti-Semite, and anti-Semitism is an affront to everything that's British. Now that was very reassuring. So you have people who live in towns where they've never seen a Jew, and yet they feel they have to defend the Jewish people. So on one hand, there is a rise, like everywhere else. There's a rise in anti-Semitism. I think a lot of it is on Twitter and on social media, which is much more scary because people who had no influence now have a much stronger influence, but it seems scarier than it is. How is your relationship with the chief rabbi and the modern Orthodox? I'm good friends with many people in the chief rabbi's office, the chief rabbi himself. I think the relationship is very good, and we have quite a few Chabad rabbis in modern Orthodox schools. I think 35 leading modern Orthodox schools have Chabad rabbis. The fastest growing modern Orthodox schools in England have Chabad rabbis, Mill Hill, South Hampstead, others around. And we have a very good relationship with my local modern Orthodox shul, where I'm actually a member of as well. That's Nathan. Anyone else? Another question?
I think you're good. Thank you so much, Rabbi Sudak.
Okay, thank you.
That was really, really great, very informative. And Yahafku Yomim Elu, tomorrow night's Tisha B'Av, where we experience the Geula, the Mashiach. Well, these days will be transformed into a day of joy and simcha. Wishing everyone a good night. Thank you so much, Rabbi Sudak.
Thank you.
All communities for joining, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night, everybody. I'm going to try get some rest as well.
Good morning to you.
Have a good day. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bentzi. Thank you very much.